Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'll just wait a couple of minutes to make sure everybody has managed to join the Zoom call, and then I'll get started. Okay, so good morning and welcome to this next webinar in our Carbon Literacy 101 series, The Art of Communicating Sustainability. My name's Becky and I'm a project manager at Julie's Bicycle. I'm here with my colleagues Brianna and Farah, who are working away quietly in the background to keep an eye on the tech side of things. So just before we get going, just a bit of housekeeping before we get to the main event. So if you have any technical difficulties at all, please use the chat function to message Bri and Farah, and they'll get back to you directly. We have also got time for questions at the end. So please do use the question and answer box rather than the chat box to ask those questions. And you can do that anytime throughout the webinar, and I'll come to answer them all at the end. You can use the chat box if you have any kind of general thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with the rest of the audience. Today's webinar will also be uploaded onto the JB website, and the slides will be distributed around to everybody who's registered for today's webinar. So far in the series, we've covered introductory webinars on creative climate action and an introduction to climate change. We've covered how to build an environmental action plan and strategy. And today we're going to be looking at communicating sustainability. We're going to be looking at effective, transparent messaging, organisational branding, what kind of production and signage you might like to use for your messaging. And we're also going to briefly cover a look at COVID-19 and talking about sustainability during this unprecedented time. So just before we go on to the content, please do bear with me, those of you who are familiar, but I'm going to run through an introduction to Julie's Bicycle and the Arts Council programme. So we thought we'd run these webinars in this current moment because it's a huge break from the normal and we'll be rebuilding from it for a long time. So it's what we invest in and how we rebuild is going to look us into a path for many years to come. And that's why we're advocating for a green recovery. So we've got a letter to the Secretary of State on our webpage. If you haven't seen it already, please do have a look. And that's our ask for a just and green recovery for the arts and culture sector. So as many of you might already know, Julie's Bicycle are a charity. And our vision is a creative community powering action on climate change. So our two main aims or objectives are supporting culture to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees and advocating for culture to inspire action on climate change and sustainability. Julie's Bicycle have been working with the sector for over 10 years, and we offer support and advice to those who share our vision, empowering the creative sector to reduce emissions by taking bold practical action founded in science. So our work at Julie's Bicycle builds an intersection between the arts and creative industries and environmental sustainability. So our cultural and scientific expertise coupled with our sector leadership enable us to deliver a world unique training, consultancy and certification programme and a rich programme of events, resources and thought leadership. We have a huge range of freely available resources on our website, from podcasts to webinars such as the one you're listening to today, through to our online carbon calculators, which we've developed specifically for the arts and cultural sector. They're free to use and they're used by organisations all across the world to monitor their impacts. So the Arts Council England programme, we've been working in partnership with the Arts Council since 2012 to deliver their environmental programme. This webinar that you're listening to today is a specific output of that programme. And through the partnership, we help Arts Council funded organisations to report on annual environmental impacts and support those organisations to take action. You can find out more information about the programme on our website, and you can find the latest environmental report there as well, or you can also find it on the ACE website. Through our work in this area, we found that organisations have found a lot of benefits from being involved, such as energy and efficiency carbon reductions, greater resilience and reduced costs, and things such as improved team morale, creativity to environmental challenges, more collaborations, and an improvement in reputation. The data that you provide through the Arts Council programme also helps us to better understand the carbon footprint of the arts in the UK. So today we're going to be exploring how we can communicate our environmental actions, successes and challenges to the best effect. We'll look at some communication pitfalls to avoid, such as avoiding greenwashing, and also look at some ideas surrounding branding, sustainable production and signage, and how you can approach your messaging. So what are some of the kind of benefits of sustainability communications, and what are some of the outcomes that you might find when you get it right? So these are just a few of them. So effective messaging can inspire action, from simple things like encouraging correct recycling, or choosing to use active transport to attend an event, for example, through to large-scale calls to action such as mobilising people or organisations to join a campaign or a wider collaborative framework for action. Messaging can also be used to spark a dialogue, and it can be a two-way interaction with your audiences, which can be used to gather information and experiences and help inform and shape your sustainability programmes. So just before we get onto how to approach it, let's first look at why communicating climate change is so hard. First of all, climate change can appear complex, scientific. It can be seen as an environmental or a scientific problem rather than a people problem. And as something that operates over such a large scale and over such a long term, people can often feel quite powerless, or feel like they can't make a difference, or feel like it's maybe somebody else's problem to solve. So maybe politicians or engineers or the heavily polluting industries. It can also seem like a very distant issue depending on where you are in the world. In the global north, for example, the impacts are not yet felt or seen firsthand in quite the same way that they are in the global south, for example. There's also the issue of the time lag between releasing carbon into the atmosphere and feeling the impact of those emissions. So it can be difficult to visualise and connect between our actions now and, say, a drought, flood or species extinction in 10 to 20 years' time. As a species, humans are incredibly reactive rather than proactive, or in other words, we tend to wait for things to go wrong before we consider them to be a real problem or something that we need to do something about. So human history is littered with examples of this. So with climate change, there always seems to be some more pressing short-term problems to deal with. We're very, very good at blocking out information that seems irrelevant or not immediately important. We suffer from a kind of "I'll deal with it later" kind of attitude, where the difficult problems keep falling further and further down to the bottom of your to-do list. Climate change is also a moral dilemma, one that can provoke feelings of guilt. It might require us to do some soul searching, question our values, the way that we live and work and behave, all of which can be quite uncomfortable. And at the end of the day, we don't really like feeling guilty or owning up to being part of the problem. Even among scientists, climate change can be full of uncertainty. There are disagreements on the best way to address it, and where the priorities are, and what technical solutions we should employ. Understanding things like where tipping points may occur or rebound effects might occur is far from a perfect science. This also all adds to this kind of uncertainty and complexity around what it is that we need to do and how we need to go about it. And although most people are concerned about climate change, if you go out and speak to people like the average person and what they're concerned about, most of them won't say climate change. We kind of keep it as separate from our day-to-day lives, despite the fact that it's something that we all are actually very concerned about. So where to begin with this challenge of how to talk about climate change and sustainability? I think the first thing that's really important to consider is what you want your message to achieve. So who are you targeting and what is the purpose of your communications? Finding that overall purpose for the message that you want to get out there will help you to be able to start to break down who and how you target your audience. So for example, your suppliers and partners might be really interested in your procurement policies and your upcoming big projects and investments that are coming up. But they might not really be very interested in your environment-related programming. But for your audiences, they might be very much interested in your environment-related programming and less so in your policies and strategies around supply chains. So just a bit more on positioning your content and your channels of engagement. So there are an overwhelming number of ways to reach out to people. So choose what's best for your purposes and assess the benefits or disadvantages for these different formats for the purposes of your message. For example, if you're interested in people's response to your message, then social media is a better platform to use than signage around a venue or an article on your webpage. So this next slide summarises some internal engagement that you might want to use within your organisation. So these will look quite different to your external channels. So for things like reports, again, you might want to consider the benefits of digital versus paper. You might want to explore things like what kind of fonts and inks you could use to be more sustainable, and what kind of paper type you can use. And you can carefully choose those materials to minimise your environmental impacts. Again, people internally might be more interested in the breakdown in the results of a Creative Green certification, for example, and they might want more detailed information such as reports and briefing documents. So this is a summary slide, and which basically summarises some do's and don'ts for your messaging. We're now going to go through some of these in detail, and I'm going to put out some examples and give you kind of an in-depth explanation of what each one means and how you might go about it. So this first one, effective messaging using facts and data. So if you take that first quote, we reduced our energy use by 4.6%. If you turn that into, we saved enough energy to pay an apprentice for a month, that really gives meaning to that 4.6%. It gives people something they can visualize and picture as a positive outcome of that energy saving, something that they can see the difference of. And again, the second one, we reduced our emissions by 13%. So we reduced our carbon emissions 13% last year, which means we're keeping track with Greater Manchester's ambition to become zero carbon by 2038. So this puts the emissions reduction in line with a wider programme of work and the impact of that work in the context of the citywide framework. So this gives the message so much more weight and explains the wider policy context. So in summary, when you use facts and data, you want to find the so what to your statement. We've done X and this means Y. So yeah, finding that context will really strengthen your messaging. Okay, this is a hugely important one, avoiding greenwash. So just to give a bit of a description of what greenwashing is, it's a fairly widespread problem. So many products or services claim to be eco-friendly or green without really explaining how or why they're better for the environment. So some organisations may spend more time marketing how green they are than actually carrying out any practical action on the ground. So in other words, to use some colloquial language, it's about talking the talk, but not walking the walk. So examples of greenwashing can include unsubstantiated claims, irrelevance. So for example, a product might say that something is free from toxic chemicals, but in actual fact, those chemicals may well be illegal already. So the claim is irrelevant and doesn't really make any difference with that product compared to a different product. Some other examples are using being vague or non-specific, or sometimes just outright lying about the claim. So from a consumer perspective, for example, you might go and buy your fish and chips on a Friday evening, and the fish and chip shop might have a sign which says sustainable fish. As a consumer, you really want to understand, what does sustainable fish actually mean? Is it certified, or is it actually farmed fish, but just is that farmed fish actually sustainable, or is it leading to are those farmed fish being fed on wild fish from lower down the food chain, which is actually having a negative impact? So it's about really questioning every statement that you read and asking why. So you can apply this to yourself and your own messaging in the same way that you can as being a consumer of a product. So before you put a claim out there, before you say something like we're green now, or this is eco-friendly, you've got to ask yourself what you would say if somebody questioned that statement. So do you have the facts and data to back it up? And is your statement precise and transparent? This next point kind of links into that greenwashing point in some ways, but this is about making sure that you keep, don't just assume that people are going to get your message. So it's such an easy trap to fall into, especially if conversations around sustainability form a large part of your job or your conversations. So remember, not everyone is carbon literate or has a good level of knowledge about environmental issues. So don't shy away from explaining to people exactly why you're carrying something out and why it's important to you and the ethos of your organisation. So taking this first example, our new living roof is an important tool to help fight the urban heat island effect. So the urban heat island effect is technical language, which not everybody might understand. So, but if you change that into our new living roof is a much needed green oasis for people and insects, it automatically transforms that statement into something that people can associate with, and they can automatically see that beneficial outcome of having a living roof. The next one is to say, be simple, but not too simple. So all our food is now eco-friendly. Remember that important point about adding context to your messaging. So if you change that into, did you know that animal agriculture is responsible for nearly 1/5 of global carbon emissions? We're really proud of our delicious new vegetarian and vegan menu with lots of locally sourced produce. So in this case, rather than just using the term eco-friendly, it's when you transform that into an explanation of what eco-friendly actually means, you're much more likely to get people on board with your programme and get them to be celebrating that vegetarian menu in the same way that you are, by addressing the wider reasoning behind why you're doing what you're doing. And the third example, take public transport for the planet. This might make sense to you, but someone else might read it and think, why should I? Actually, it might be more inconvenient or more expensive for me to do that. So by following that up with some stats and statistics about the impacts of taking public transport, it highlights the human and social impacts of congestion. So air pollution kills an estimated 900 people in Birmingham every year. Take public transport. So again, that's using that data to really explain why it is that people should take that action. So I'm going to use a couple of cases from sector to demonstrate people that have really taken these ideas on board. So Shambhala Festival are a really brilliant case study of a highly effective and well thought out messaging campaign. So in 2016, Shambhala made the decision to go meat and fish free, which was a decision that they really didn't take lightly. It's one that required very careful managing in terms of audience communications. They had a lot of risks to weigh up in terms of potential loss of ticket sales and not really knowing how audiences might react to the change. However, their mission, as a festival, they have a mission to become as sustainable as possible. So they couldn't really ignore the environmental impacts of having meat and fish on sale at their festival. So what they did, they took the leap of faith, and most importantly, they framed the change as an exploration. It was a journey that audiences and traders could play a part in. So they did a lot of work on gathering information and had dedicated pages on their website for frequently asked questions. And on site, they had a dedicated venue which hosted debates, luxury dining experiences with sustainable food, and talks and kind of creative explorations. So people had that opportunity to be a part of the change and fully understand it. They also did surveys and found out that afterwards more people were open to eating less meat in the longer run. So it really had that behaviour change impact that they were trying to achieve. So this is a screenshot from their website, which shows the level of detail that they use to explain the change. They use a tone that's colloquial and friendly and easy to digest. Sorry, that's a terrible pun. But you can see that they have referenced the resources that they used to inform their environmental-based decision-making. So people can really dig for themselves and understand the reasoning behind their decisions. So the next top tip is to use positive messaging and focus on solutions. So these are some screenshots from some marketing from Digital Festival in Holland. So the kind of idea behind these are that people really want to connect to positive, fun and feel-good concepts, not be kind of dragged down with gloomy messaging about the end of the world and the kind of more dire aspects of climate change. So notice the kind of use of positive language. So in the middle one there, it's digital loves carpooling. What about you? And the one to the left, let's make the city a greener place and party together afterwards. So there you've got these ideas of inclusive language. So let's do this together and let's do something fun at the end. Let's have a party. And the middle picture as well, you can see people fighting over carpooling. It's a bit of a funny image, but again, it shows it's like a social norm to carpool. It's something that's fun and everybody can get involved in. And the picture on the right, this is about using a circular economy principles. So taking people's wee and turning it into fertilizer, which can be used to grow vegetables, which is something they do on the site. But it's an interesting concept. It's drawing people into that idea that sustainability can be useful and it can be exciting and interesting, and showcasing that really positive outcome of taking a sustainable approach. So I want to talk about branding quickly. So whilst creating a whole green brand might not match everybody's communication aims, organisations' brand has been used to pull together all of their green initiatives under one big umbrella, which can help strengthen their green credentials and messaging and show all of the things that have been achieved under that one brand. So a couple of examples are Green Nation, which is Live Nation's brand, and Green Adventures, which is Matthew Bourne's New Adventures green brand. So it's a really easy way for audiences to see that logo and know that what they're about to read on a programme, for example, is connected to that company's sustainability initiatives. The Coca-Cola picture again is in the top there is an example of how you might want to use green imaging, how the imaging can be used to kind of create this feel of organic, natural, these outdoorsy vibes, which make the drink look healthy and organic and eco-friendly as well because of the use of the green label. So you can think carefully about how you use imaging in your messaging and branding. This example is from Shambhala again, where rather than creating a brand, they've taken a brand and turned the concept on its head. So the usual images that we associate that bottled water companies like to use, which include things like mountains and streams and fresh natural imagery, they've taken that and rebranded with the words evil and naive and deviant to expose the environmental implications of choosing plastic bottles over reusables. So campaigns. Campaigns are a really great way of promoting audience inclusion and participation. And again, social media is a great platform to run campaigns and keep track of them too by participation, shares, and the number of people reached. So some of you may be familiar with the 30 Days Wild campaign, which is run by the Wildlife Trusts. It's one of my personal favourite campaigns, and it invites people to do something wild each day, which can be something small, from photographing a bird in their garden or taking a walk in the local park, through to building, actually building new habitats for nature, such as insect hibernacular, or taking part in wider wildlife survey efforts. So over 30 days, people share pictures under the hashtag 30 days wild, and the intention is helping people to reconnect with nature and celebrate their interactions with wildlife. Another great campaign example is the Lyric Hammersmith. They ran a 4-week campaign for a plastic-free Lyric. So over those 4 weeks, they had targeted actions for each area, from the canteen through. So they had different weeks where they, for example, promoted the use of reusable cups, or getting rid of straws. And towards the end of the programme, they even invited in some guest speakers to talk about plastic pollution in the environment. Another nice example, also related to plastics, is the hashtag One Less campaign. Again, it's a really clever use of language for a hashtag, which kind of draws people in, and it's memorable and catchy. This campaign aims to position London as a city that no longer uses single-use plastic water bottles. And it's a great example of what can be achieved through collaboration, and because they collaborated with Thames 21 to do some science, citizen science data collection on plastic in the Thames. And they have also partnered with the Mayor of London to install drinking water fountains around. So they've installed 28 drinking water fountains, which have saved 308,000 single-use plastic water bottles. And some of those water fountains can be found at some arts and cultural venues across the city. If you don't want to create your own campaign, then another idea is to link to campaigns that are already existing. So one strategy that you might like to have a think about is making your own calendar for the year. So you can plot out which campaigns are happening at different times of the year. For example, Earth Hour, I think, is usually in March. And you'll get things like World Ocean Day on another month. And for each pre-existing campaign, you can think about how as an organisation you can either promote, participate or engage with that campaign, and what that means for you and how it links to your values and how you might engage and involve your audiences. So Season for Change as well is a major cultural festival and campaign which celebrates the environment and inspires urgent action on climate change. So if you want to find out more information about that, you can do so on the Season for Change website, and there's plenty of information there on how to get involved. But together the aim is to reach 10 million people with participation from more than 250 arts and cultural partners. So this example is from Manchester Museum. This is a really nice example again of audience participation and drawing in the audience to play a part in messaging. So here museum goers took part in imagining and beginning to realise a low carbon future by sharing their thoughts. And there was also a part of this was called climate exchange. So it offered climate control. It offered the public a daily opportunity for visitors to the museum to have a structured conversation around climate change with different people and in a dedicated space within the museum. So the next part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about how you could, in terms of your choices in terms of production and materials, can really help reinforce and strengthen your message. So carefully considering the materials you use for your signage and production can kind of make your message live and breathe your values that you're trying to communicate. So if you have a plastic-free campaign or a slogan and you put that onto a plastic sign or a banner, it might seem a little bit hypocritical or seem that you're not really espousing your values in quite the right way. So you might want to do some research into some alternative, more eco-friendly materials that can help your message gain some authenticity and can inspire others to follow in the same way by educating people about some of the lesser known alternatives to mainstream or less eco-friendly materials. So some examples on this slide, mushrooms, or they can be used in a wide range of products, from food packaging through to clothing, and they work as a really brilliant alternative to plastic in lots of ways. Seaweed is another one that's gaining a lot of interest as an alternative material. As seaweed grows, it absorbs carbon dioxide and it doesn't compete with crops. It doesn't take any fertilizer or fresh water, and it also contributes to decarbonising the ocean as it grows. There's a seaweed product called Uhu, which is made from notpla, which is a brown seaweed, and that has 5 times less CO2 and 9 times less energy intensity than PET, which is the main type of recyclable plastic. Again, there's tons of solutions to be found in things like palm leaves or products of sugarcane, and it's a really fascinating area to start exploring when you think about what materials you might like to use. There's some case study examples here. So WOMAD Festival worked with Green Hat to create sustainable messaging with this board for their 2019 festival. You might also want to think about designing for reuse. So if you're going to have a banner or something like that made, then you can, this example here shows where they reuse the banner each year, but there's a patch where you can stick Velcro, so you can stick on the year for each new year as it comes round. So dealing with resistance. This topic is really about understanding your audience, what their views are, and how open and receptive they may be to exploring sustainability and climate change. So everybody will be at a different stage here And you have to really carefully handle those that may be dismissive, just as carefully as those that may be alarmed, and be very sensitive to people's emotions and their viewpoints, life experiences and concerns. So someone who may be dismissive might actually be hiding the fact that they are scared, anxious and worried about climate change, and they might find it easier to dismiss or block out the reality. In this case, trying to win them over with kind of hard-hitting facts about wide-scale loss of life or climate change impacting the economy might not be the best approach. Or sometimes people that are disengaged might also just be very uncomfortable with change. So many of us are creatures of habit, and we can find anything that creates a change in our behaviour or lifestyles, as some environmental issues may cause us to do. Some people find that very anxiety provoking. So one way of making this more manageable is to introduce some small scale, bite size or gradual changes. And also considering the timing very carefully and reframing changes in a positive way. So for example, if there's a campaign for sustainable travel in a workplace, you might use something like, we know walking or cycling to work will help you reach your fitness goals and give you mental clarity to start your day. So we're introducing flexible working to make it easy for you to make a healthy choice. So it's about kind of finding all of those really positive things about that behaviour change that are going to draw people in and support them in those decisions. For a communications project as well, you might want to consider audience surveys to understand the distribution of views and perspectives your target audience have. And that can help you to tailor your messages more effectively and pinpoint some causes for concern and barriers to taking sustainable behaviour. So communicating sustainability during COVID. So this is a tricky one. So many of us will maybe grappling with how we continue to talk about sustainability in the wake of the global pandemic, where people are struggling with a whole range of personal, emotional, health and financial issues. So this guide by Climate Outreach was commissioned by the European Climate Foundation, and it addresses this challenge. And it's a really useful read, so I do recommend you have a look if you're interested. You can find it on their webpage. But what I've done here is summarise the top 10 recommendations from the report. So I'll just touch on a few of them and expand a little bit so you can get some context. So the first one, timing and sensitivity. This is about recognising people are going to have competing concerns during this time. And people's capacity to consider climate may be reduced for some, but on the other hand, other people might find they have more time for reflection and have an opportunity to develop their sustainability plans, for example. Embedding behaviours. So lockdown has been a really interesting time in that we have seen our lifestyles and routines dramatically change. This could be a time to open up conversation about which habits people might like to keep. So for example, our creative climate chats, we've been doing a survey and we found that the majority of people have been spending more time in nature since lockdown. So this is something we know is really beneficial for our mental and physical well-being, and something that people might like to think about going forward. So communal values are strongly associated with pro-environmental behaviours, and unprecedented events like the pandemic we're currently experiencing can increase altruistic behaviours and that sense of community. So we've seen loads of people rushing forward to volunteer within their communities and help out their neighbours and support frontline workers during this time. Equally though, times like this can also amplify pre-existing divisions in society. So COVID is really highlighting issues of inequality, leading to more and wider conversations about fairness in society. Overall, there are a lot of similarities between COVID and climate change, and the impacts on society both present a global threat to well-being, where the most vulnerable are hit hardest and first, and both the need for collective responses that deliver justice, equity in economic, environmental and social terms. So a few final top tips to kind of summarise some of what we've been going through. Have a go at connecting through people and stories. So this is about bringing your messages to life through real life examples, maybe by engaging your audiences and asking for their input into your campaigns or into your sustainability initiatives and programmes. And number 2, keep it simple. So remember, it's great to be simple, but also don't forget your context to what you're saying. I've included this quote from Albert Einstein, which is, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough, which I think is quite helpful for being able to think about what message you're trying to get across. So make it positive, showcase solutions, bring fun, creativity, and frame problems as challenges to be solved through creativity, collaboration, and a bit of adventure. So build togetherness. This is about creating new social norms. So a lot of environmental issues need everybody to be on board. Lots of problems can't be tackled in silo. So work with partners, audiences, and embed your approach across your organisation. So show your efforts as a part of a larger movement and a piece in the jigsaw of tackling the bigger picture. Learn what others are doing and show what you're doing, that we're kind of all in this together. The next one relates back to that greenwashing. So be honest, transparent, and don't feel like you need to know everything about an issue or be 100% sustainable to start talking about sustainability. The value in communications is sharing where you are in your journey, what challenges and solutions and successes you've found along the way, and you can help others to, by sharing those challenges and solutions and taking more of a joint collaborative approach to solving them. So if something doesn't make sense to you or you're stuck, don't see this as a failure, see it as an opportunity to spark a dialogue and find solutions. But just don't greenwash. So I'm going to leave you with this age-old quote, which I think helps nicely summarise a lot of what we've been talking about this morning. So tell me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I'll understand. So thank you very much to everybody for joining us this morning. I hope you found the content helpful. I'm now going to open the floor to questions. So please do make sure you put those questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat box. And I'll try and make my way through them now and answer as many as I can. So there's been a question which is, why is it recommended to avoid protest imagery? So that's something that was covered in the, I think that's going to be answered. So that was something that was covered in the report that I referenced. And I think that was to do with, you know, protests can sometimes be associated with violence and conflict, but actually we want to show, it's more important to show images of people coming together to kind of show positive changes through making things together. I don't think I've explained that very clearly, but if you read the report, it does cover that point. I've had a question, what is biodegradable? So this is an interesting one, and I included it on the greenwash slide for a specific reason, which is biodegradable often sounds as if it's an eco-friendly thing. But if you biodegradable basically means that something can break down in natural environment, or in an industrial sense, so in a big factory or heat processing plant. Lots of plastics, for example, are called biodegradable plastics, but actually that might not mean that they break down in the natural environment. It might also mean that they might not break down for 500 years, but they will break down eventually, so they can call it biodegradable. So that's a term that is kind of branded around, but really you really need to investigate before you kind of understand what it really actually means for that product. Got some more questions coming through. So I've got one that says, we are a local authority museum with a large natural history collection. Do you have any examples of how climate change has been addressed in museum displays? That's a really great question, and we do, at Julie's Bicycle, we do a lot of work with museums, and we look at production and exhibitions. So there's lots of different case studies on our website, and there's also a guide which you might find interesting, which is our museums framework, and that sets out lots of different approaches to sustainability within museums. So you can find that on our website, and that would probably be a really helpful resource to have a look at. But yeah, there's a lot of really great work being done by museums at the moment, and museums are also larger buildings which can consume quite a lot of energy, so they're really important to have a look at that as well. Okay, so another question here. We have a general target to be more green from ACE. What would be the top tips that all arts can do better at their general running work? So by general running, I'm assuming you mean just kind of day-to-day operations. And some top tips, I would definitely suggest that the most important thing to do is to measure your impacts and have an idea of where you can make the most change and the most environmental improvement. So you might want to scope out across your organisation. By using our tools, you'll be able to see whether you have large emissions from transport or energy consumption, or whether you want to look at the sustainability of the materials that you use, or audience engagement. So there's all kind of different areas that you might want to target. So our webinar last time was on building an environmental strategy and action plan. So I think that would be my number one top tip, is definitely to start with an action plan. So scope out where it is that you want to improve, and then start to dig down into that detail of what you can do to reduce your environmental impacts. So thank you very much for that question. So another question, here. I run a museum shop, and we're trying to make our shop as environmentally friendly as possible. Would you recommend doing this just through the stock we sell, or should we include some signage? That's a brilliant question, and I think there's kind of two angles to this. Of course, it's really important to look at your stock and analyse it in terms of its green credentials and where it's sourced from. That can be it can be a complex task in some cases, but there are some ways that you can work with your suppliers to gather that information and find out about the sustainability of your products. In terms of the signage, I think that really depends on the purpose of those communications and what it is that you want your customers to understand about the things that you're selling. So You know, I think it can be helpful for some products if people know that they can be recycled, for example. So if your signage is going to help customers to use that product in a more environmentally friendly way, then that's brilliant, and you're going to want to let people know that that's the case. You might want to include some signage to explain that you're undergoing an audit of your stock in your shop, and you're looking to make all of your produce as environmentally sustainable as possible. And so you could include some more kind of detailed signage so that customers that are interested in that can read a bit more detail about what it is that you're doing and how you're going about it. And yeah, again, a really nice opportunity to open a dialogue with your customers about the kind of products that they might like to see. And lots of people also might have ideas of products that they'd like you to stock that they've seen elsewhere that are environmentally friendly. So that could be a really nice opportunity. Got a couple more questions coming through here. So I've got a question. Do you have any thoughts on moving beyond sustainability, being regenerative, and have you seen anyone do this well in the cultural sector? So that's a really brilliant question. Thank you for that one. So in terms of moving beyond sustainability, I think it's really important to understand where you are, and you know, sustainability is a journey, and it's incredibly difficult to be 100% environmentally friendly. So it's always going to be reviewing what your actions and what you're doing and the impact of those, because it's a constantly changing realm with new technologies and products and information coming through and research coming to the fore all the time. And that's something that really has to be kept on top of. But in terms of the regenerative idea and cultural organisations adopting those regenerative ideas, that's absolutely where we need to be heading. And there's some really nice case studies from festivals that are looking at becoming completely circular. So there's a movement called Circular Festivals. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten the name of it off my top of my head because my brain has gone blank. But there's a collaboration of festivals that are coming together to be completely circular, I think by 2025 or within the next sort of 5 years. And a lot of progress has already been made. So that they do things like look at design for disassembly. So staging is designed that it can be taken down and reused rather than just thrown away. There's things that they do, such as looking at circular food solutions, so sourcing food from waste which would otherwise have gone to waste, or sourcing food locally, and any food that isn't eaten is used to create energy. And so yeah, there's lots and lots of work that's been doing in that area, and that particular festivals project is a really nice example of knowledge sharing and collaboration to overcome some of the challenges. So yeah, do have a look at that if you're interested. But yeah, there are other examples, but that's a particularly strong example. So thank you very much for that question. So this is a really interesting question we've had through. So climate is a key issue, but so is the loss of species and habitat, and audiences and organisations could do more here practically and to raise awareness. Why not a bigger focus on the degradation of nature? And thank you, this was from someone anonymously, but thank you very, very much for bringing up this point, because it's something that I'm personally very, very passionate about. And you're absolutely right, for a long time, unfortunately, these two conversations have been kind of seen as separate, but absolutely they are one and the same in lots of ways. And actually species, we're also experiencing an ecological crisis as well as a climate crisis. And they're both related and equally devastating. So in terms of what you can do to bring audiences and to get audiences and organisations talking about this more, you can look at the impacts, the ecological impacts that your organisation has. So a very good one to get started would be food. Thinking about how your menu can help not degrade nature, and looking about the sourcing and the ways that the things that are grown. And again, you might want to look at biodiversity solutions that you can put in place on site. So there's some great examples of some cultural venues that have things like beehives and pollinator-friendly plants or insect hibernacular. And again, these can be used as a focus point for audiences or customers that are coming to your venue, and you can really link that in with your wider programme and your environmental strategy, so that biodiversity and ecology plays a key role in your strategy. And you know, if you don't have space to do those things, that you might want to look at joining wider campaigns of action. You might want to volunteer to support some local wildlife initiatives. So there's absolutely tons of things that you can do, but it's just about looking at what's appropriate to your organisation and what works with your programme of work. But creative programming can really focus on loss of species. So you might want to do creative works as well as the practical action on the ground. So thank you very much for that question. That's great. I've had a question from Franca, who says they've missed the beginning of the session, and will you get the presentation afterwards? Yes, absolutely. So this session is being recorded, and it will be uploaded to our website, and you will also receive the slides in your email. So thank you very much. I've had a question, I think just check how we're doing with time. We're almost out of time, but I'll just answer maybe one more question which we've had is waste a source of renew? I'll just check there aren't any in the chat as well. Okay. Okay, so I've had a question, is waste a source of renewable energy? So again, you have to kind of think carefully about that word renewable. So yeah, waste can be burnt and turned into energy. But for it to be kind of truly waste is something that's already been generated, and waste production is quite damaging to the environment in lots of ways, depending on what that waste stream is. So what I would say is, you know, there are forms of energy production which are far more environmentally friendly than that can be more environmentally friendly than burning waste, for example. So it's probably better to look at solar or wind solutions than relying on waste as a form of energy production. Thank you for that question. And we've had a question about Julie's Bicycle's opinion on the Green Homes scheme, which was announced yesterday. I don't think we have a kind of Julie's Bicycle position on that announcement. I could tell you my own personal opinion, but you know, it's probably not the JB, not a JB stance. So I'm happy to email you, and if there's any specific questions that you have on housing and insulation, then that's absolutely fine. But I think that's all of the questions. So thank you very, very much, everybody, again, for attending. And we will be in touch very soon. Thank you.